Hey everyone, we are in HED 241, Biostatistics in Public Health, and we are talking about Part C, Correlational Statistics. Part 12, Section 12 is correlation. So what is correlation? Correlation refers to the extent to which two variables are related across a group of participants. Okay, so make sure you understand that basic definition of correlation. So let's look at an example. So here you have the SAT-V, which stands for the SAT verbal portion. Okay, and you've got a group of students. Here is their GPA from their freshman year of college. So the question is there a relationship between SAT verbal and GPA? Okay, look at Janet and at Scotty. Okay, SAT verbal of 756. GPA of 3.8. Scotty, 629, GPA 3.2. So they have a high SAT verbal and a high GPA. So that would say that yes, there is a relationship. The two students who scored high on the SAT verbal also have the highest GPAs. Likewise, the two who scored the lowest on the SAT verbal and had the lowest GPAs. So that's saying that there is a direct or positive relationship. Okay, this type of relationship, in a direct relationship, those who score high on one variable tend to score high on another variable. So they scored high on this, so they scored high on the GPA. Okay. Likewise, those that scored low on the verbal had a low GPA. Low, low. Okay. That is also a direct or positive relationship. Low on one, low on the other means it's a direct or positive relationship. Okay, so you see score on variable 1 was high, which was SAT verbal. Score on variable 2, which was GPA, was high. Score on SAT verbal was low. Score on GPA was low. So that's a direct relationship, which is also known as a positive relationship. Okay, let's look at another example. Okay, example 2 shows that scores on two variables from one group of participants. Okay, so you have self-concept and depression. These are your participants. The first variable is self-concept, which was measured with 12 true-false items containing the statements such as, I feel good about myself when I'm in public. Participants earned 1 point for each statement that they marked as being true. So the self-concept scores could range from 0 with all statements marked false to 12 with all statements marked as true. The second variable is depression, marked with standard depression scale with possible scores 20 to 80. Higher scores, sorry y'all, I don't know what my computer just did. Higher scores indicate more depression. Sorry about that, I completely lost my train of thought there. Okay, so the higher this score is, the higher or more depression. Okay, so with that being said, do the data, and I want to point out real quick, data is always plural, so it's do the data because there's multiple. Indicate that there is a relationship between self-concept and depression. Okay. So notice that the participants with higher self-concept scores have relatively low depression scores. So those that have higher in variable 1 have lower in variable 2. Those with lower here have higher here. Okay. In other words, those with higher self-concept tend to have lower depression scales, while those with lower self-concept tend to have higher depression scores. This relationship is called an inverse or negative relationship. Okay. In an inverse relationship, those who score high on one variable tend to score low on the other. Okay, so low on one variable, high on the other, or high on variable 1 and low on variable 2. One thing to remember, correlation does not equal causation. does not mean that having low self-concept causes depression. Okay, you need a controlled experiment is needed to determine cause and effect. So looking at example 2, the data do not establish whether having a low self-concept causes depression or whether being depressed causes an individual to have a low self-concept. Okay, all it says is that there's a relationship. Okay, in fact, there may be any causal relationship at all between the two. There may not be any at all between the variables because numerous other variables might account for this relationship. Okay, so what it's saying is one might not actually cause the other at all, but there is a relationship, meaning that when you often see one is high, the other is low. Okay, all you can say is that there is a relationship. That's it. And you could say that it is a negative relationship. That's what you can say. Cause and effect. Controlled experiments in which different treatments are administered to the participant is needed. So to determine cause and effect, you have to have a controlled experiment. So my computer really wants to update right now. Sorry, guys. A researcher could give the experimental group a treatment to improve self-concept and then compare the average levels of depression of the experimental group with the control group. That's the only way to determine a causal relationship. Okay. So correlations are of interest in developing theories. Often, a postulate of a theory may indicate that X should be related to Y. If a correlation is found in a correlational study, then the findings can help support the theory. So usually when theories are being developed, usually they're looking at relationships and causes. Correlations, I apologize. They're looking at relationships and correlations. Okay. Let's look at one more example. Correlational data almost always indicates individuals who are exceptions to the overall trends, making the degree of correlation less obvious. Okay, so if you look at these numbers, now let's look at this. Joe's GPA, college GPA, was 0.9. Joe's in trouble. Joe's SAT verbal was extremely high at a 630. Okay, that's an exception to what we were seeing earlier. Okay, Patricia's GPA, she's doing well, 3.1. SAT verbal score wasn't as high. Okay, so what it's pointing out here is that there are always exceptions. Okay, so while there's an overall maybe relationship, a positive relationship between GPA and SAT verbal, does not mean that's the case for all participants. Does not mean that if you have a low ACT score, that you're guaranteed to have a low GPA at the W. Does not mean that. Okay. Section 12 questions. Make sure you review all the questions, not just the ones that are required. And as always, please let me know if you have any questions at all. Sorry for some of my computer craziness today, but hope y'all had an okay time following at least. And if you have questions, definitely let me know.